this does matter. Diversity matters, equity matters, inclusion matters. And we have to make sure that, we have people like me and others who are out there really making sure that those voices are heard and seen and heard, and create opportunities for them, quite frankly, right? Making sure that as we're creating these spaces, that we're also passing the microphone for others to be seen and heard as part of this process, right? You open the door, but make sure you support other people going through it.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the All Inclusive podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Vanessa Nazario, Chief DEI Officer at Memorial Healthcare System. During the episode, we discuss how to measure and gauge the success of DEI initiatives and hold leaders accountable. We also discuss how to overcome challenges that may arise during this important work. As always, before jumping into the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on your notification bell, and follow on your favourite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. That being said, let's jump in. Welcome, Vanessa.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Hello, hello, hello.
I'm so excited for our conversation today. I'm really glad that you've been able to come in and we're going to have this fantastic chat. So why not kick off, tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely, Natasha. And thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I believe in the power of storytelling. And, sometimes when you share certain aspects of your life, it might help someone else who is at a place where they're looking for a little guidance. So I appreciate you creating the space to have this conversation. So a little bit about me. As mentioned, I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for Memorial Healthcare System. We're based in Hollywood, Florida. I've been with this organization going on 2 years now. I'm actually originally from New Jersey, where I worked in diversity for another healthcare system. And although I was born in Puerto Rico, so I want to make that clear, I'm not a native to New Jersey. I was raised there, so I refer to it as my home because I spent so many years there. And that's where I got my sort of introduction to community development, diversity, equity, inclusion, and sort of what has evolved to what I do today, which is creating equitable outcomes. So as I mentioned, I've been with this organization for 2 years and definitely have been focused on creating a framework that will hopefully survive me in terms of what we're trying to do to create a space for everyone to be received in a really sort of affirming manner. So that's a little bit about me and who I am and where I'm at. And I know we're going to unpack this a little bit more as we get further into the conversation.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're going to unpack it all. So
we're going to get down and deep.
Yeah. So my first question for you is, working within the healthcare system, you're not only servicing as a DEI officer, it's not only the employees, so kind of the staff there, it's also the patients as well. So what can we do to ensure fair outcomes for not only the patients, but also for your employees and for the staff?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's important for those that are listening to this conversation to understand when you do diversity, equity, inclusion at a healthcare system, we're not only focused on our workforce and our community, but we're also looking to make sure that we're creating equitable outcomes for our patients, right? And our patient population that we serve, I'll just share with you where we physically sit in terms of Broward County. And the patients that we see, we serve a very diverse community, multi-ethnic, multi-language, multi-everything. So in order for us to create a space where people are treated respect and dignity, and again, we're meeting people where they are, we have to think about how do we create that space? What are the things that we need to work on in terms of policies, procedures, education, raising awareness, the way we act and behave in front of our patient population. So for me, I keep that top of mind as we're designing our DEI strategy, that I'm not only thinking about how to create a diverse workforce, retaining that talent, but also making sure that we're thoughtful about what are we doing to create a space where our patients feel safe when they come into our space. So as an example, if you are a transgender individual, man or female, and you're looking for an environment, a healthcare provider where you feel safe coming into our space to receive care, what have we done to earn that trust, right? And you have to think about how we educated our staff on understanding and being sensitive to the community and making sure that we acknowledge that individual and affirm them, right, by calling them their preferred name or however they want to be addressed and identified. And that's just an example. So when you do that and you do that well, that should hopefully mean that the word will spread and other patients will say, you know what, I want to go to that organization because I understand that they are really about seeing and treating us equitably. And that's what we work on every day in terms of our patient population. So I wanted to give you an example. Another thing is, language, being able to communicate in the preferred language of our patients and having services available, different tools, which we do. We have different services to make sure we're communicating because language is everything, right? Communication and everything to be able to communicate with that patient in the preferred language so they can really explain what's going on with them. It's, as you can imagine, paramount, right? We can't get that wrong.
Yeah,
So
no.
those are just a couple of examples. So we're all about making sure we're creating a space for our patients to be affirmed and treated with respect and dignity first and foremost. So those are just a couple of examples of, my sort of thought process and why this stuff matters.
And what's been your proudest moment so far in doing the work that you're doing?
Just one proud moment. Come on, Natasha. There's so many things that I can highlight
What
and
stands out?
illuminate.
What stands out
Okay,
for you?
what stands out? I would probably just sort of using the example that I just gave of LGBTQ plus and trans. So one of the things that we pursued in 2021 was our first designation from the Human Rights Campaign. And for those that are unfamiliar, they're the largest LGBTQ advocacy organization in the country. They really make sure that organizations such as healthcare organizations are committed to creating safe spaces for the community. So we went after what they call their healthcare quality index designation, and we were able to secure it for our flagship hospital, regional hospital. And to be able to secure that designation, there's just so many layers to doing that we needed to go through to make sure that we secure that, from where we're marketing, where we're deploying sponsorship dollars. Do we have representation on our leadership team who is from the community? What are we doing from accepting our own and employees and creating a space? So, for example, having a gender transition policy. So, if you do have a team member who is transitioning while at work, that we commit to them pretty much that we will be there for them, right? We're creating a safe space for them to do what they need to do to feel, that they can transition and they don't have to worry about bias and discrimination, whether, from a colleague or what have you. So we've done a lot. So for me, to be able to reflect on that, that's one of my proudest moments that we were able to secure that designation. And it's not so much about the designation as saying, hey, we are HEI designated. It's actually the work that it took for us to get there and the readiness, right, that now is in place forever, right? That's gonna, those policies will live after I'm long gone, and the education that we've invested as for our staff as well, for them to be mindful and sensitive and affirming. To me, though, that I would probably say, if I were to choose one, that would be one of my proudest moments, because I know what it means to that individual who, again, is scared and afraid because they're facing whatever medical diagnoses. The last thing we want them to worry about is whether they're going to be misgendered at patient registration, or walking into a medical room and the physician making an offside comment about, oh, well, I thought you were a girl, not a guy. That kind of stuff, right? That stuff
Yeah.
really, really matters. And to me, I would say, that is probably one of my proudest moments, to be able to have that designation, but the work that it took for us to get there.
Oh, fantastic. And talking about the work that it took you to get there, I mean, I can only imagine. What do you feel was some of the strategies that you put in place that allowed you to get that designation?
Yeah, so there was a lot of different things. So definitely policies needed to be adopted. So for example, I mentioned the gender transition policy. That was one that we crafted and received approval on, to make sure that, again, for our own workforce who are transitioning, whether male to female, female to male, regardless, that there's guidance for our managers, right? In terms of what are we asking of them to create a safe space. And when the person chooses to update their preferred name and talent management, which we also did, was create those data fields. So someone can go in and say, all right, well, my legal name is Jose, but I want to be addressed as Maria, as an example. So from that point forward, that person will be addressed as Maria and will use the proper pronouns for that individual. So those are just two examples. And then we did stuff on the patient side also where we are very thoughtful about the rooming policy. So if you, again, are from the transgender community, to have a conversation with that patient in terms of their rooming preference to make sure that they feel safe within our space. And so those are just two sort of examples, one on the workforce, one on the patient
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
We also invested in education to raise awareness and sensitivity about the LGBTQ plus community.
And I mean, in general, when you give yourself this sort of goal in terms of, okay, this is what we're going to strive for, this is what we're going to go out and try to achieve in order to become more diverse and inclusive and equitable for our workforce and patients, what advice would you give to leaders that are working towards trying to make this sort of change in their organization?
One piece of advice I would give to Natasha is that although the goal might feel daunting because there's so many different steps to get there, that it should probably attack it from a place of the baby steps. Let me take the short-term goals and the tactical steps that move that goal forward first, and do what I can to make sure that I'm setting it up where I can reach whatever that final outcome is, and not to get sort of discouraged if there's setbacks. I've faced setbacks, and sometimes a lot of this stuff you have to work with so many different teams to bring it to life, right? So although I'm the visionary, I'm the strategic planner, when I talk about healthcare quality index, I had to work with our clinical teams, our marketing teams, community relations, so many people, right, to be able to address a specific question, secure whatever document we needed to secure, get the legal approvals if it would require legal approval for policies. And you have to have patience. So for me is to really think about it from a place of it will all come into place and it'll all work out, and not to get overwhelmed. Take baby steps, create those alliances that are needed to get to that longer term goal, and take time to build those relationships again, whether it's with clinical, whether it's human resources, whomever. Just take the time to do that and not get overwhelmed. And although it might feel that it's taking longer, it's okay. You have to take it at the pace where your organization is ready for whatever sort of outcome you're looking to accomplish. So kind of keep that also in mind. It's easy to get caught in, well, when I look at my competitors, they're light years ahead, they're doing all this stuff, and I feel like I'm behind. Listen, it's okay to look at, what best practices there might be out there, but you have to take it at the pace of where your organization is from a readiness perspective, and take the necessary steps to make sure that you build the foundational pieces as you're sort of building the entire sort of house, if you will. So that would be my advice, Natasha. Don't get overwhelmed. Take those baby steps and take the time to build the rapport with whomever you need to work with to get to the end result.
How do you deal with the people that are pushing back on the work that you're doing?
You know what? Natasha, say, talk to the hand. That's it. That's what you need to do. Leave me alone. Get out of my way. I'm not dealing with you today. Okay, well, maybe, I say that in my head. I don't
Yeah.
really say it out loud. But, one of the things I've learned in this business, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion, whether it's community development, whatever it is, you're always going to have your naysayers and the people who might not believe in the cause, at least initially. And I always say, and I mean, this is not my original thought, but success breeds success. And I've seen it happen where, when you see a team that really puts their arms around DEI and their employee engagement scores are really where they need to be, they're high, their retention rates are phenomenal. Their quality metrics for patients are where they need to be and they're being commended for it. And all of a sudden, there's a leader who's struggling a little bit and they're like, well, wait a minute, how can I get a piece of what's going on there and participate, right? And
Yeah.
then they might come out of their hole and say, okay, you know what, I need to engage with DEI because I see this is part of what I need to invest in terms of my own business line or my own service line. So for me, that's how I deal with it. I try not to get overly frustrated and exasperated, when you do have that pushback from people, because it's easy to do that, but you just can't be persuaded to go down that path because you'll wear yourself out fast.
We're going to take a minute to thank our friends at Dandi, the DEI analytics company, for supporting the show. To drive real change today, DEI leaders need to be strategic and they need to be data driven. That's why today's most successful DEI leaders use Dandi to measure and manage their DEI programs in real time, track key DEI metrics, and create reports at a push of a button. Are you ready to join the DEI measurement movement? Click the link in the description below to download your free essential guide to data-driven DEI transformation.
You will wear yourself out fast if you sit there and worry about all the no's and all this sort of stuff, and you won't have energy for the good stuff, right? For the stuff that will sort of move that proverbial needle forward.
Yeah, no, definitely. I totally agree. And so how can we keep leaders accountable for their actions and the decisions that they make?
Yeah, well, I think it depends, what we're measuring. Every leader has certain metrics that they're measured on. So I'll highlight a couple just from our healthcare, and I'm sure some of these apply to other organizations, for example. And I just named a few. So employee engagement. Most organizations conduct employee engagement surveys, and we want to understand, how are they feeling, and if what we're seeing are trends where they're disengaged, that they're on the precipice of leaving an organization, that's a metric that matters for any organization because, when people leave, it costs money. It does cost money to replace that individual, right? The energy in terms of working with either recruiting firms, if that position is open for a long time, that means that someone else has to pick up the slack. That might be overtime hours. And then also, thinking about, what that means for employee morale. So if the morale is on that team because, that leader is just not engaged and not really supporting them in terms of creating an inclusive environment, those things get noticed and noticed really, really fast in most organizations, I would say. So that's a way to hold them accountable, is to make sure, again, that when we're looking at our employee engagement scores, that we're using a barometer and that lens to say, if they're not doing well, doing root cause analysis and saying, is it because you're not creating an inclusive environment? One thing that I'll share here is part of our strategic plan was to include specific questions around DEI within our employee engagement survey, and we did that in 2022. So we created a baseline.
Yeah.
So now we have sort of a temperature check of how people are feeling in terms of our culture relative to being an inclusive environment and being seen and heard. So every leader gets their scores, and now moving forward, every year we'll see, is it shifting towards the better or worse? Are the things that we're doing making a difference in terms of education awareness and other campaigns? So I would say, that's one example that any leader, most leaders can use as a gauge, and hopefully be held accountable for the results, right? I think that's a really, low hanging fruit for most organizations. And then there's other metrics, customers. So for us as patients, what are our patients telling us? And if we're getting our patient experience surveys back and they're noting, I feel that I'm being disrespected when I show up to your emergency room. I feel like there's a lot of bias in the delivery of care. These are metrics that matter to any administrative officer within an organization. And that's where, again, that partnership with DEI to make sure we're addressing whatever those concerns are.
And so for you, what's been the biggest challenge in your role?
The biggest challenge, oh my goodness, there's I think, I don't like to see it as challenges, Natasha. I like to flip that a little bit. It's more about, where there are areas of opportunities. And there's always opportunities to engage more people in sort of this process of creating a culture of belonging, right?
Yeah.
But I have to be held accountable also in terms of making sure, as I stated earlier, the why behind it. Why does it even matter? Why should we care about this? And being able to communicate that in a really sort of clear, right, sort of manner so people understand the why. So I lead that. And for me, if people aren't grasping to the why and I'm not seeing, sort of adoption of what we're trying to do here, then that creates an opportunity for me to maybe revisit, the way I'm approaching that conversation.
What for you has been the driving force in doing the work for you? Because you've talked about the why and explaining that to people, but for you, what's driving you?
I love that question. What is the motivation, right? What is my why in terms of, why I do this today? I would probably say it really started when I was a young girl and being Hispanic. I am a Hispanic woman, Puerto Rican, and growing up in a low income community, understanding the real challenges that are faced by those communities that have been historically excluded and marginalized, and the real sort of issues that are dealt with on a daily basis by our most of these communities. It really stayed with me throughout the years, and that's what's influenced me to continue to be an advocate and ambassador to make sure that there's a voice at the table representing them, to make sure that they're not forgotten, and that we create opportunities, equitable opportunities for all communities. Again, all those that have been historically just excluded from these conversations, from the process. So for me, it all started as a young person and coming from that environment and seeing, as I navigated like corporate, I worked for a financial services firm for 20 years in community development, and seeing sort of how people navigated those waters and who got promoted, who didn't get promoted, and when you looked at certain teams and there was no diversity, and sometimes I was the only Hispanic woman, for example, I said, there has to be a way that we can do this much better, right?
Yeah.
And when I was introduced to this whole world of DEI as part of my involvement in an employee network, and the power of having those voices around the table and creating awareness about, and our different communities of color, and I represented the Latina community, and I saw the response that we were getting from leaders in terms of appreciating the insights that we're bringing to them and what they can do to change certain behaviors. It just sort of fed my appetite to say, okay, I want to be able to continue this journey and this work, and continue to follow it through, and because I've seen the results and the impact, and to hear people come up to me and say, I feel seen and heard, thank you for what you're doing within this organization, because this does matter. Diversity matters, equity matters, inclusion matters, and we have to make sure that we have people like me and others who are out there really making sure that those voices are heard and seen and heard, and create opportunities for them, quite frankly, right? Making sure that as we're creating these spaces, that we're also passing the microphone for others to be seen and heard as part of this process, right? You open the door, but make sure you support other people going through it. So that is what inspired me. That's why I do what I do today. And I would not take anything back. I want to continue to do this as long as the good Lord wants me to do it.
Oh, that's so lovely. Oh, Vanessa, I'm so glad we're ending on such a good note. I think that's amazing. And thanks again so much for joining me today on the show. I wish you all the best for the future
Thank
until we speak
you.
again.
Thank you. This was amazing. The time went by rather fast, and hopefully, I left your audience with something that they can sort of glean from and take back for their consideration. And I'm always available on LinkedIn if anyone wants to sort of reach out to me. Vanessa Nazario, MBA, is probably who you could search on LinkedIn. By the way, if they want to get in contact with me.
Oh, yeah. And I will definitely be linking your contact info, your LinkedIn profile below the episode. So if anyone wants to get in contact with Vanessa, definitely click on her LinkedIn details and she can reach back out to you.
Please, please. Thank you for being a gracious hostess.